Easter brunch at the Thompson family estate was supposed to be a celebration of faith and family. Instead, it became another opportunity for my relatives to explain why my career choices were fundamentally misguided. "Nicole, sweetheart, when are you going to stop playing around with computers and find a real job?" Aunt Patricia's voice carried across the elegantly set dining table, where 3 generations of Thompsons had gathered for our annual tradition of passive-aggressive family bonding. I looked up from my phone, where I'd been monitoring pre-market trading activity for what would be the most significant day of my professional life. "I'm not playing around, Aunt Patricia. I run a technology company." "Social media isn't real work," my father declared, cutting his ham with surgical precision. "It's entertainment for teenagers. You're 31 years old, Nicole. Time to consider a career with substance." The conversation was depressingly familiar. For 8 years my family had been dismissing Streamline X as Nicole's little internet hobby, despite the fact that my platform had revolutionized how businesses manage their digital presence across multiple social networks. They saw my work as frivolous content creation rather than the enterprise software solution it actually was. "David's absolutely right," my Uncle Richard added, gesturing toward my cousin Mark, who was cutting his toddler's food with paternal efficiency. "Look at Mark. Regional sales manager for a Fortune 500 company, beautiful family, real contributions to society. That's what success looks like." Mark smiled with practiced humility. "Well, Uncle Richard, I wouldn't say I'm particularly successful. But at least I have a stable career with growth potential. Not like..." He gestured vaguely in my direction. "Whatever it is Nicole does on the internet." What I did on the internet was run a platform that processed over 2.8 billion social media interactions monthly for 47,000 enterprise clients. What I'd built over the past 8 years was a comprehensive solution that allowed businesses to manage their entire digital presence through a single interface, with AI-powered analytics that had become the industry standard. But my family measured success through traditional metrics: job titles they could understand, office buildings they could visit, and career paths that followed predictable trajectories. My work, conducted primarily through strategic partnerships and remote management of a distributed team, was invisible to them. "I just think," my mother said, refilling her mimosa, "that it would be nice if Nicole could find something more permanent, more professional." The Hendersons' daughter just made partner at her law firm. The Weatherby boy is chief financial officer at a bank. Those are careers that matter. "Mom, my platform serves clients across 43 countries, I said patiently. "We've got partnerships with Microsoft, Salesforce, and Adobe. Last quarter alone." "Nicole, dear," my grandmother interrupted with the authority that came from 92 years of family gatherings, "I'm sure your computer work is very nice. But when are you going to settle down and start a family? All this technology business won't matter when you're my age." I checked my phone again. 11:47 a.m. In exactly 13 minutes, Streamline X would begin trading on the Nasdaq as a publicly traded company. The IPO had been oversubscribed by 340%, with institutional investors fighting for shares in what financial analysts were calling the most significant social media infrastructure offering in 5 years. "You're always on that phone," Cousin Mark observed. "That's exactly what I'm talking about. Real professionals know how to disconnect, how to be present with family." The irony was magnificent. Mark's criticism of my phone usage was happening moments before that same phone would alert me to the completion of an initial public offering that would fundamentally alter my net worth and validate 8 years of work my family had consistently dismissed. "Speaking of being present," Aunt Patricia said, "shouldn't we say grace? It is Easter after all." My father nodded solemnly. "Patricia's right. We should take a moment to reflect on what really matters. Family, faith, real accomplishments that make a difference in the world." As we joined hands around the table, I felt my phone vibrate with incoming notifications. The markets had opened. Trading had begun. Streamline X was about to become very real work indeed. "Dear Lord," my father began, his voice taking on the reverent tone he reserved for family prayers, "we thank you for gathering us together on this holy day. We're grateful for our many blessings, our health, our successful careers, our family bonds that sustain us through life's challenges." My phone continued buzzing. I could see the screen lighting up with alerts, but couldn't check it without breaking the sacred circle of family prayer. We especially thank you for guiding us toward meaningful work that serves others and builds lasting value in our community. At exactly 12 p.m., as my father's prayer reached its crescendo, the unmistakable sound of the NASDAQ opening bell echoed from the television in the adjacent living room, where my teenage nephew had been watching financial news while avoiding family conversation. The prayer stopped. Everyone looked toward the sound. And that's when my phone exploded with notifications that would change everything. "What in heaven's name is that noise?" my grandmother asked, her 92-year-old voice cutting through the sudden chaos of electronic alerts emanating from my phone. I tried to silence it discreetly, but the notifications kept coming. Call after call, text after text, email after email flooding in as financial markets absorbed the impact of Streamline X's public debut. "Nicole, please turn that off," my mother said sharply. "We're having a family moment." "Sorry, let me just..." I glanced at the screen and felt my stomach drop. The stock price was up 67% in the first hour of trading. My investment banker was calling. My CFO was texting. The media requests were multiplying by the minute. "This is exactly what I mean," Mark said, shaking his head with disapproval. "Complete inability to prioritize family over whatever crisis du jour is happening on social media." "It's not social media," I said quietly, trying to process the magnitude of what was happening on my phone while maintaining some semblance of Easter brunch decorum. "Of course it is," Uncle Richard laughed. "Nicole's probably dealing with some teenager's Twitter drama or helping someone get more followers on Instagram." From the living room, my nephew Tyler's voice called out, "Aunt Nicole, there's something on the news about your company." The adults exchanged confused glances. Tyler was 17, obsessed with technology, and the only family member who'd ever shown genuine interest in my work. "My company?" I repeated, my heart racing. "Streamline X." Tyler appeared in the doorway, practically bouncing with excitement. "It's on CNBC. They're saying it's the biggest tech IPO of the year." The silence that followed was profound. 14 family members stared at me with expressions ranging from confusion to skepticism to dawning realization. "IPO?" my father asked slowly. "What does that mean exactly?" "Initial public offering," Tyler explained with the patience of a teenager educating adults about obvious concepts. "It means Aunt Nicole's company just started trading on the stock market. They're saying it raised $2.3 billion in funding." Aunt Patricia's fork clattered against her plate. "Billion? With a B." My phone rang again. This time the caller ID showed Goldman Sachs Investment Banking. "I need to take this," I said, standing from the table. "Nicole, we're having Easter brunch," my mother protested. "Surely your social media business can wait until after." "Mom, Goldman Sachs doesn't call about social media business," I interrupted, stepping into the hallway to answer. "Nicole, congratulations." The voice of my lead investment banker was electric with excitement. The offering exceeded every projection. "We're looking at a market cap of $18.7 billion at current trading levels." Through the dining room doorway, I could see my family huddled around Tyler's phone, watching CNBC coverage of what the financial media was describing as a watershed moment for enterprise social media infrastructure. "The institutional investors are thrilled," my banker continued. "Microsoft just announced they're expanding their partnership, and we're getting acquisition interest from 3 different tech giants already." "Acquisition interest?" I repeated, loud enough for my family to hear. "Nothing serious yet, but when a company goes public at this valuation on day one, everyone wants to know if the founder might be interested in discussing strategic alternatives." I returned to the dining room to find everyone staring at their phones, reading articles about Streamline X's market debut. The mood had shifted from dismissive family gathering to emergency fact-finding mission. "Nicole," my father's voice was carefully controlled, "this news report says you founded Streamline X 8 years ago." "That's correct. And it says the company serves 47,000 enterprise clients across 43 countries." "Also correct." Mark looked up from his phone, his face pale. "It says here that Streamline X processed $847 million in revenue last year." "Actually $853 million, I corrected. The final Q4 numbers came in higher than projected. My mother set down her mimosa with shaking hands. "Nicole, are you telling us that your social media hobby is actually a $1 billion company? $18.7 billion according to current market valuation, I said, checking my phone as the stock price continued climbing. Uncle Richard was scrolling frantically through his device. There's a Forbes article here calling you the most successful female tech entrepreneur under 40. That was published this morning, I confirmed. Part of the IPO media strategy. The Easter brunch had transformed into something resembling a financial wake, with family members processing the reality that the person they'd been condescending to for 8 years had just become one of the wealthiest entrepreneurs in the technology industry. Cousin Mark's voice was barely audible when he spoke. Nicole, exactly how successful are you? I looked around the table at faces that had shifted from dismissive superiority to shocked confusion to something approaching awe. Successful enough that Goldman Sachs interrupts Easter brunch, I replied simply. Tyler burst back into the dining room, his eyes wide with excitement. Aunt Nicole, they're talking about you on Bloomberg now. They're saying StreamlineX is the fastest-growing enterprise software company in North America. He turned his phone toward the table where a CNBC reporter was standing in front of the NASDAQ building discussing my company's market debut. StreamlineX CEO Nicole Thompson has built what analysts are calling the Amazon Web Services of social media management, the reporter announced. The platform's AI-powered infrastructure has become essential for Fortune 500 companies managing their digital presence across multiple channels. My father leaned forward, studying the screen with the intensity he usually reserved for financial documents. Nicole, they're calling you a CEO. Because I am a CEO, Dad. I have been for 8 years. But you said you worked in social media. I said I built a social media platform. For enterprise clients. StreamlineX isn't Facebook, Dad. It's the infrastructure that allows businesses to manage their presence across all social platforms simultaneously. My phone buzzed with a text from my chief technology officer. Nicole, we need you for the investor call at 2 p.m. Every major tech publication wants interviews. This is insane. Aunt Patricia was scrolling through articles with growing amazement. Nicole, there's a piece here saying you have 847 employees across 15 countries. Actually 963 employees as of last week, I corrected. We've been hiring aggressively in preparation for the IPO. Employees. My mother's voice was faint. You have employees? I have 5 vice presidents, 3 general managers, and a board of directors that includes former executives from Google, Microsoft, and Salesforce, I explained patiently. Mark had gone completely silent, staring at his phone with an expression of dawning horror. Nicole, this article says StreamlineX's IPO made you worth. It says your personal net worth is $4.2 billion according to current stock prices, I said, watching the number myself with a mixture of pride and surreal disbelief. The silence that followed was absolute. 14 family members sat frozen around the Easter brunch table, trying to process the fact that the person they'd been patronizing about getting a real job had just become one of the wealthiest people in the technology industry. $4 billion, my grandmother repeated slowly. Dollars. Yes, Grandma. Uncle Richard's voice was hoarse when he spoke. Nicole, I don't understand. How did we not know about this? Because none of you ever asked what I actually did, I replied. When I tried to explain my work, you called it computer stuff, and changed the subject. When I mentioned client meetings or international partnerships, you assumed I was exaggerating. But you never said you were wealthy, Aunt Patricia protested. I never said I wasn't. I live in a downtown penthouse, drive a Tesla, and travel internationally for business every month. You assumed I was struggling because my success didn't look like the success you understood. My father slowly set down his coffee cup. Nicole, when we said social media wasn't real work, you were dismissing an industry that generated $147 billion in revenue last year, I finished for him. And you were dismissing your daughter's role as one of its most successful entrepreneurs. Tyler looked around the table with the satisfaction of someone who'd been vindicated. I tried to tell you guys Aunt Nicole was doing something big. But you never listened to teenagers about technology. My phone rang again. This time it was the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. I really do need to take this, I said, standing from the table as my family sat in stunned silence. Sometimes the most important prayers are answered in ways no one expects. The Easter brunch never recovered its festive atmosphere. My family spent the rest of the afternoon reading articles about Streamline X while I fielded calls from investors, media outlets, and government officials interested in discussing technology policy. "Nicole, we owe you an apology," my father said quietly as I prepared to leave for an emergency board meeting. "We completely misunderstood what you've accomplished." "You misunderstood because you never bothered to learn," I replied gently but firmly. 8 years of dismissing my work as playing with computers doesn't disappear with one news cycle. My mother approached hesitantly. Can we start over? Can you help us understand what you've built?" "I'd be happy to, Mom. But it would require genuine interest, not just excitement about the financial outcome." Mark, who'd spent the afternoon in stunned silence, finally spoke. "Nicole, I've been thinking about what you said earlier about real contributions to society. Your platform, it actually helps millions of businesses communicate with their customers more effectively, doesn't it?" "It does. And it employs nearly 1,000 people worldwide, generates billions in economic activity, and has democratized digital marketing for small businesses that couldn't afford traditional agencies." 3 weeks later, I established the Thompson Foundation for Technology Education with my family serving on the advisory board. They finally had a way to discuss my success that they could understand. Philanthropy had always been respectable in their social circle. The family learned that real work comes in many forms, and that the most transformative innovations often look like playing around to people who don't understand their significance. Sometimes the best Easter miracle is the revelation that success was sitting at your table all along.